so much going on, isn't there? There's so much of intricacy to the rhythm and everything else. So lots of great preparation, and you play really well as a quartet, and as I say, really, really good balance. I just want you to, I suppose it's an overriding theme of what we're going to talk about for the next little bit, is how we, in a score like this one, when we're looking at the music, obviously you've all got your parts in front of you. Funny, you managed to get your parts in front of you. But of course, as ever, when we're playing any kind of ensemble music, we need to think about the whole. Yeah. And when we're thinking about the whole, but it doesn't necessarily need the score in front of you, it's an oral thing as well. We need to think about, what are the things we're going to pick out? Where's the kind of driving force, for example? And in a piece like this, we need to think about where's the driving force for the rhythm, what's really driving it in terms of its jazz. And that's often your good self, isn't it? You've got that really kind of quite punchy rhythmic line a lot of the time. But then in terms of how this is arranged, there's a lot of detail. And I was talking to the group just now about what we want our audience to go away with when they've heard a performance, and so this is a bit unusual because obviously normally you'd be playing for maybe 45 minutes if you're doing a whole concert as the saxophone quartet, but and this piece lasts about 5 minutes, but that's still a concert. Concert could be 1 minute, it's still a performance, do you know what I mean? So the audience have come in, they've heard you play, and then they go out, and this is the piece. And they'll be really impressed because you play really, really well. But I'm just wondering whether we can try and just adjust the texture a little bit and the way we're approaching the score, so that we hear a little bit less detail and lots of 4 separate lines, and a little bit more kind of where's, as I say, the driving seat, what's driving it at a particular moment in time. So baritone, I would say absolutely in the beginning, it's all about you, and I'm just wondering if we can keep these dum, bum, 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 almost little pinpricks of sound, yeah? Have something quite sort of lighter in your mind. Now I know technically these things I'm asking huge amounts of you, and I'm not a saxophonist, but I just wonder if you can, just think of it a bit like a kaleidoscope, where you just turn the kaleidoscope a little bit and it lets a slightly different kind of slant of colour through. I think that's what you need to feel. I think at the moment, you're all 4 of you sort of thinking about your line and making sure that you're playing your line really, really well, and that's great, and that's what makes it a polished performance. But I've now told you that you've got that polished performance and you play your lines really well. So it's about knowing what to take out and pull back from, as well as knowing what to then push forward. Now, obviously, the really obvious thing to say is, okay, fine, when you have the tune, when you have the melody, you're the centre stage. But it's not quite as simple as that. As I say, sometimes it might be who's driving the rhythm, or, for example, who's driving the articulation. So tenor sax, where's the tenor sax? That's, sorry. You. Oh, sorry, we're good. Bar 4 already. Dum, bum, 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 bum. That little bit there has got real kind of intrigue in terms of the articulation. Yeah. So I think it's kind of like a duet between you two there. Can we just stop it again and just think a little bit about bringing those top 2 lines down a bit, just making them really, really light, and then you come up for bar 4 and you play your bass line here as a solo. Okay? Let's see how that goes. But I think you can make more than da 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 yum. Could you do that idea where you kind of like, especially when something's chopped up? I mean, I think this what you have to remember when we look at the arrangement and indeed the composition in the first place is, why does a composer, why does an arranger chop a line up? It's not just because it's not just for convenience. It's a real feature, isn't it? Okay, we all know that the actual like da 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 da, but he wants it this kind of ba 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 bam. It's like a sausage cutter. Yeah? So make a thing of that, and that's something I want to say to you at the end, which is very similar. We must remember in performance that it's not always about being polite and sort of shading off lines in a very kind of graceful way. This isn't graceful music, and it doesn't make it any less good music. Some of the greatest music in the world is kind of punchy, a little bit, sort of abrupt and that kind of thing. Music could be anything. It could be any kind of character. So, chop it off a little bit more. One more time at the beginning, and you were really going for it for that articulation there. If you could possibly make it even lighter at the start, that would really help the mix of what we're doing here. One more time to start. Bar 17, where the kind of the melody really flourishes. Excuse my awful singing. But what do you think you really want to bring out there? What do you want your audience to be hearing within the texture? Because again, it comes back to my overriding point here that the texture of this could be one of two things. It can either be us hearing 4 lines, or it can be us hearing a whole. And within the whole, yes, sure, we want certain things to be picked out at certain points and certain things to be driving us, but do we want to hear 4 layers, or do we want to hear this? I'd argue very much it's this, yeah? So on that theme, at bar 17 and on, through to 25 or wherever, where do you think, what's the particular points of interest beyond just the melody? Any ideas? It might be your part, or it might be something you've noticed about someone else's part. Yes? You want lots of melody, yeah? Okay, great. Now, what about your own part, though? How would you characterise what you're doing in bar 17?
17, quite funky rhythm.
Funky rhythm. Oh, well, I couldn't have phrased it better myself. That's great. So let's have a bit more funkiness, yeah? Da 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 ba ba da da. That little tie there, I think would do really well to bring out. And I think also with my point about really going for the whole and then picking things out of that whole, onset tone is so important. So we were talking about chopping off phrases, but the way in which you kind of really point entries, yeah? And I reckon your entry at that offbeat into bar 18 is an example in place, in point, yeah? That you can really give us lots of onset tone there. The point being that most people, getting back to this idea that you're coming along and you're just doing this 5 minute, I say just, I mean, it's arguably the hardest thing in the world to come on stage, perform for 5 minutes and make a real impression, okay? And that's your job here. And you've made a really good impression of me. So we're talking about fine points here. But with this piece, you can almost guarantee that your audience would have heard it, either in its sort of original pop song form or just a tune they know, yeah? So it is this business of looking for the thing probably that isn't always the melody, and how that kind of, as you said, funky, how it spices it up, how it jazzes it up a little bit more. So can you just do those upbeats into bar 17? More entry from yourself, and I think just enjoy your line again, as if it's a kind of solo line, as if you were playing the melody there a little bit more. So from the da 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 ya bom bom into bar 17. That time. By the way, when I'm talking about our two friends here, I'm very much as well talking to you as well, because we, as chamber musicians in a quartet, we need to be constantly, as ensemble players, aware of building our line on the basis of what other people are doing. And what was really interesting about the way the 4 of you then performed that section, very differently to the first time, by the way, was that it became far more about the bass in the middle. Okay. Now I was standing at the back quite deliberately. I could still hear top lines really clearly, and that's because, as I was saying to our friends just now, the human ear always picks out top lines. We never won't hear them. It's like when we hear a choir, the soprano and the choir will hear them incredibly clearly. The first violin in the string quartet, the flute in their trio just now, it will soar through because we're programmed like that. We're programmed to pick out top lines. And we, your audience, have to work a lot harder at middle and bottom lines. But suddenly when you, again, back to the idea of a kaleidoscope, where you twist it round, and get those other colours to sound through, we get something so much more interesting. And not just interesting for the sake of being interesting, oh, we're hearing different things now, but for example, bar 21, 22, 23 is a really interesting harmonic moment there, where you've got your A sharp or whatever it is there, and you know, it's a little twist of the harmony. And that time I heard that twist, that little extra bit of spice. The first time I kind of didn't. I heard the melody, which I already knew really well because it's Ain't No Mountain High Enough. Yeah, and so you're giving me a lot more interest here. Now, talking of that, what do you guys want to go for at bar 25? Only he is playing, but you must all, I guess, have an opinion about this. What's different about bar 25 at the double bar here? What do you think?
It's like punchier. It's not harsher, but more powerful in that section.
Yeah, more powerful, so punchier, yeah, as well. And so let's check the notes here. Nathan, what do you think? Bar 25, because you got nearly 2 bars rest.
Yeah, I think Clara kind of leads that bit, and then we all just come in at different sections.
Yeah, it's more kind of dispersed, isn't it? More disparate, I guess. Disparate, not desperate. You know, lots of things happening in different directions. I think, and someone, I'm guessing your coach maybe, or one of you has put in MP, but remember dynamics are only as good as what we then interpret them as. You know, an MP on a piece of paper doesn't necessarily mean much. I think, unless you really do it, of course, but I think it's like this moment of kind of, you're right, it is punchier, but it's this moment of pullback. Yeah, we've had this big kind of blasty, fantastic melody. I love this tune, by the way. It's amazing, and it's a real kind of, hey, ain't no man high enough. You know, it's sort of like glorious in that respect. And then suddenly here, bear in mind your audience will know that tune really well, but they're hearing this arrangement of it. I think you want to take them by surprise. I think at bar 25 you want to think, what? Thought I was listening to Ain't No Mountain High Enough. What's going on now? Boom, boom, boom. Maybe they think you're kind of merging into like a medley, going into another piece, yeah? And then you kind of chip in with Nathan with your boom, 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 boom. Keep them in suspense a little bit, yeah? But it's going to be very tight rhythmically. Again, when you performed it through, I kind of at this point, I heard 4 different lines doing different things, but I didn't quite get what the whole was meant to be. And I'm suggesting, I'm not telling you, by the way, it's just a suggestion, but I'm suggesting that maybe this is a kind of real pullback moment, and especially when I love the saxophone to bits, by the way. It's one of my favourite instruments, so please don't take this as a thing against saxophones, but it kept, especially in a lovely acoustic like this, there's a lot of brightness going on in the saxophone quartet, isn't there? And we, all of us, me as a pianist as well, we need to think about what our instrument is associated with, and then always challenge that and think, what can we do? And a saxophone, of course, can be incredibly soothing in terms of its melodic quality, but I think you could also just imagine that you're, imagine you're a string quartet and you're just plucking very, very tiny little plucks, and it's often good to have another instrument image in your mind, try and interpret that back to your instrument. So a real pullback, and I think especially when you're saxophones, you need to look for those moments of pullback that it's not all about, it's more about sort of something really quite enclosed in the middle of a piece. So just go from bar 25, let's see if you can give me something of that element of suspense at this point. Almost of no man's land in the score. We don't quite know where it's going, and that's where I think it could be. Maybe the word is sneaky, and I'll leave you to go away and think about that in your practice room. Okay, but that bar 25 to bar 37. Just start your practice one time just there. Okay, think about how you can really pull it back, make it sort of sneakier, lighter, more playful. Maybe have those kind of images in your mind, maybe. And then 37. This key change. Remember, key changes, again, like I was saying just now about dynamics, they're not just a kind of like a flat on a page or a sharp or a natural sign. That doesn't mean anything in itself. Harmonic change is really about a change of colour, yeah? So I'm just going to plant the seed with you because we're sort of out of time. But at bar 37, I want you to think about the key change as a change of colour, and how you can do something maybe a little bit warmer, maybe get a bit more with the tenor, yeah? Again, thinking about this overriding image of the texture being a bit more to the middle, a bit more from the bottom. And I often think with harmonic change, and you've got these lovely spotlights in this hall, and it's good to think of them as like you're in a theatre. I always think one of the most exciting jobs in the theatre, sadly they haven't been open for many months now, but hopefully they're getting back open, is the lighting designer. That person who gets to change the whole way you look at the actors on stage just by putting a red, like you've got there, a red filter or a blue filter or a yellow filter. But imagine all the lights suddenly changing to blue, for example, and then red. You know, we get this sort of, the atmosphere completely changes. That's what a key change is, okay? It's not sort of, oh, we're now into B flat major. Doesn't mean anything, who cares? It's the emotional quality of the key change and the colour of that harmonic change, yeah? Really well done. As I say, you're so polished, you're playing really well your lines and really well as a quartet, but now just mould it more as a quartet. See yourselves as I always say this with a quartet, you'll find there's 5 of you, and that 5th person is you, the quartet. And sometimes that's why it's sometimes nice to give yourself a name, you know, not just the year 10 quartet. Maybe you've got a name. Have you got a name? No? Okay, so find a name for you. Something that gives it a bit of a personality, but remember that's your collective personality. Yeah? So probably something beyond the year 10. Saxophone quartet would be good, because I don't know, call yourself the Sneakers or the Mountain Climbers or whatever it might be, but something that sort of brings its life as a quartet. Brilliant, well done. And no injuries to report on your instrument, it's all fine. It's, I think you have to move it fell over, but it looks fine. Yeah, good. Excellent. Right, thank you.